we need to, right, you need to push. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call our meeting to order. Today is February 5th, 2019. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Mr. Glassball?
Here.
Mrs. Hildebrand? Here. Mrs. Hoskins? Here. Mr. Bob Jones? Mr. Tony Jones? Mrs. Shaw? Here. And student representatives? Here.
Thank you. And if you could please call the calendar.
On Friday, February 15th, there will be no school. On Monday, February 18th, it is President's Day, and schools and offices are both closed. And Tuesday, February 19th, there's a school committee business meeting.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the superintendent's presentation on a proposed elementary boundary adjustment. One thing I'll just note for people here and watching, no decision is going to be made on this evening. We want to have the presentation, allow the citizens and parents to have an opportunity to take a look at what is proposed, and then it'll probably be not even maybe the next meeting, the meeting after that we take action. I think that's what we're planning on doing, and either approve, deny, or make any changes to the proposal that we think are necessary. We want to give the public an opportunity to comment on that before we make a decision. So we won't be doing anything tonight. And Dr. Auger, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Blasball. Am I, Jazz? Yes, hello?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to lean in, I guess, a little bit. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm Phil Auger, superintendent, and you know, I know it's a little disconcerting to hear that boundary lines will be redrawn for elementary schools. The last time that a redrawing of any boundary lines occurred in North Kingstown was 9 years ago. It was in 2010, and at the time, the school department had closed Davisville Elementary and had gone from some of our schools being K through 3 schools and some of them being 4 or 5 schools, and switched them all to K through 5. So now we're at the place where we have 5 elementary schools that are K through 5. And the numbers that we've had in those elementary schools have been pretty consistent through the years. But in the last couple of years, we've noticed a particular spike, especially in the Forest Park area. A lot of people have moved in there. We had a huge push just in kindergarten at that school. We also had a big push in the Stony Lane catchment area this year. Stony had always been a school that had been above 90% capacity, and it's pretty much stayed consistent, but it's growing a little bit too close to 100% right now. So let me talk a little bit about the reasons why we need a realignment plan right now. Forest Park, in particular, next year is projected to be at 103% capacity. And to detail what capacity means, that doesn't mean that every teacher has the maximum number of kids in a classroom that teacher could possibly have. That may or may not be the case in a school with capacity. Capacity, for the purposes that we're talking about tonight, is a number that is determined by fire departments and architects and the Department of Education when a school building is built. And it basically says, this is how many students you can have in a building. So the capacity at Fishing Cove is 335 students at one time. Now, we may have more than 335 students at Fishing Cove, but that's because half of the preschool comes in the morning and half comes in the afternoon. But at any one time, we can't have more than 335 students in that building. Forest Park, the number is 275. Hamilton, the number is 450. Quidnesset, it's 383. And Stony Lane, it's also 450. Interesting point about the history of school capacity and these boundary realignments. Back, say, 25, 30 years ago, the areas of Hamilton and Stony Lane were a very high-growth area in North Kingstown. So while Hamilton, the original building, was built at the same time as Forest Park, Hamilton has a significant addition on it. You probably would know that Hamilton actually has a gymnasium on it, where Forest Park does not. And Stony Lane and Quidnesset are also a picture image of one another in the core school, but because there was a high period of growth in the 80s or so, Stony Lane has an addition on the back of that school, so there's a capacity for more kids there. So, so the capacities projected in terms of how these would work is that Fishing Cove would have about an 86% capacity rate. That's a good number. That's where you want to land. You're using the building efficiently, but you still have room for, significant growth if it should happen in any given year. As I mentioned, Forest Park, we would be looking at 102%. We cannot allow that to happen. It's against the law, so we need to do something there. Hamilton, however, is very low right now. That is not an area that is growing, at least with elementary-age children, as much as the other schools in the area. Quidnesset's about 75%, which is a very comfortable number, and Stony Lane right now is about 94%. So if we can do anything to reduce that number a little bit, that would help. But to put that in perspective, Stony Lane 10 years ago, when the original plan was put together, I remember Dr. Thornton was the superintendent then, and he mentioned that the changes that were being proposed at that time and then approved would put Stony Lane at about 94, 95%. So overall, that really hasn't changed too much in 10 years, but it's still higher than where we would want it to be. So the proposed realignment to do this, I'm trying to put together a proposal here that respects where people already are, that honors where parents would like to have their kids, and that buys us at least a few years before we need to make any further changes. And if we do make changes, they would be minor. Now, over the years, you could be talking about, building new schools, taking some schools down. In the previous 10 years in this district, we have closed 2 elementary schools, for instance, and districts do that kind of thing. We've said publicly here that we would like to do something about our middle school situation, where Wickford Middle School is very old. So a project that would take a school offline or build a new school or combine things, those are opportunities in the long run to make some of these changes that may be a little bit more dramatic than what I'm trying to propose tonight. So with this change, the first neighborhood that would be shifted would be from Stony Lane to Hamilton. Remember, Stony Lane is a school with high near capacity. We would want to lower that number a little bit, while we would want to raise the Hamilton number. And that neighborhood is right down here. It's hard to see in detail. I apologize for the lighting and everything, but this neighborhood, and by the way, when we were first building Hamilton and all, this neighborhood was part of Hamilton. You can see Hamilton's right about over here. This neighborhood is actually closer to Hamilton than it is to Stony Lane, which is up here. There's a real kind of hodgepodge of different attempts over the years to place elementary schools around the district, and as you can see, a number of them, here's Fishing Cove and Quidnesset and Forest Park and Stony Lane, are all kind of up in this quadrant. Hamilton is down here. There really is nothing way in this zone. And the housing, obviously, is further apart in this zone. A lot of fields, turf farms, etc. So it's a different kind of building, a lot more congested, closer houses, that kind of thing up in this area. So that's why a lot of the elementary schools ended up being there. And Davisville Elementary, which we took offline, that was placed, well, it's now the Davisville Academy up here, and that was, that had a lot to do with the Navy housing back in the day. So, and as did Fishing Cove. So, as some of that population came and went, so came and went available school buildings to the school department, and at the time it made perfect sense that those would be placed where they were. If we could right now, and we could just kind of, like it's a little Lego field or something, and start moving things around in more centralized locations to make it perfect, that would be really nice, but we don't have that available to us. So the other, remember, the issue here is that this area, Forest Park, is too congested, and this area, Hamilton, is not congested nearly enough. It's not utilized nearly enough. So unfortunately, those two are so far apart from one another that you really have to kind of do like a connector. So this pink area here is very close to Stony Lane, as you can see. So, and again, going back 20 years or so, this was a neighborhood that did go to Stony Lane. It didn't go to Forest Park. It's almost the same distance from the two schools. So that would be a neighborhood, and I have that here as 17 students right now. Now that's going to change year to year as fifth graders move on, kindergartners move in, people move in and out of the neighborhood. That number changes, and the beginning of next year it probably won't even be a number 17. It could go up, it could go down. But if it were today, it would mean 17 students would leave Forest Park and would go to Stony Lane. The other piece of this is kind of a unique piece. It's something where we're trying to get creative and honor requests from a number of parents who have come to us over the years about having some choice, particularly at Quidnesset Elementary School, Forest Park, to possibly go to some of the other schools. So we have transfer options, but transfer options, people need to take care of their own transportation, and they're only a one-year deal that we can guarantee. After 1 year, if more students move into a school, we may not be able to honor that transfer. So we wanted to do something creative and to do something where we could honor it, that the transportation is included, and that we would guarantee that if your student starts there in this program at Hamilton, this is the Hamilton Lottery bus that we're calling, that we would honor that as that student and siblings would get through Hamilton. So what we're trying to do there is spots that are located right along this border here of one of the stops would actually be at Quidnesset. There are two stops here right around the lower income housing facilities, and another one, then an express route to Hamilton with one stop right at the Wickford Village area, that's that area behind the police station. Trying to target areas where transportation may not be as readily available, but that option is available to any student from any school. So if you feel like, you know what, I would like a change, or my student's just coming into kindergarten, but I feel like I would prefer Hamilton, we can make that happen as long as you're able to get to one of those bus stops. And so what we're hoping will happen with that bus is, comfortably on a bus you can get up to about 55 students. I don't know if we're going to get 55 people who want to take advantage of this or not, but we have the capacity to do it. If we're, looking at population from Quidnesset and Fishing Cove, those are two schools that could, easily use a little bit of room. That would be fine. And there would still be, even with another 55 students, which would probably be as high as we could expect to get there, we would increase Hamilton's population by about 90 or 100 students. And like I said earlier, they can take another 150 right now before they reach capacity. So they would still be very comfortable at Hamilton. We're not overflowing the school. We're just making good use of the schools that we have. So the second chart, and by the way, this sheet, I should have mentioned this when I started, is right on that back shelf here, and this is what I sent out in the email if you have that available to you. So what would happen then is that Fishing Cove was at 86%. We would be looking at them at 87% capacity. Forest Park would go from 102 to 92. Still not ideal, but Forest Park is a school that there is a lot of satisfaction with that school. I don't see a lot of people wanting to necessarily, leave it. So we felt like 92 was a good number there. Hamilton, if we get about 50 or 55 students on that bus, and the population, which is approximately 39 from the Shermantown Road area, we would be looking at about 85% capacity. That would be ideal. Quidnesset would then, if 40 of the 55 students ended up from Quidnesset, say, that would bring Quidnesset to 67%. Now, there's a lot of big what-ifs, right? If it's 20 kids or 30 kids, those numbers change a little bit, but there's a lot of room at Quidnesset now, which is probably better to have a lot of room there than to have a lot of room at Hamilton, particularly with the open classroom concept. It gives a little bit more room to work and breathe. And Stony Lane would go from 94% to 92%. So not really moving that school all that much, but again, it's had a history of pretty much staying right around that number over time. So we would create much needed cap space at Forest Park. We would create some space at Stony Lane. We would better utilize Hamilton, so it'll be more consistent with the other district schools. And there'll be a more consistent demographic in terms of, low-income population, those eligible for free and reduced lunch. So on the second page of this, I've given kind of a, one scenario if, the population at Quidnesset, for instance, right now has 69% free and reduced lunch. So if 2 out of every 3 of the students who came from Quidnesset to Hamilton were to make this change, we would go from about 34% free and reduced lunch at Fishing Cove to 33%. Forest Park would have 22% eligible for free and reduced lunch, and that would stay pretty consistent. It looks like 23 in this new model. Hamilton would go from about 12% to 18%. Quidnesset would drop a little bit from 69 to 61%, which would be a nice help there. And Stony Lane would really not be affected by that at all. It would still stay at 9%. So just to be clear about some of the rules, a lot of people have called and asked about different scenarios with this and what does it all mean. So there are no proposed changes for the middle schools. Both of our middle schools right now are roughly at the same percent capacity, so we're in a good place for that right now. So it doesn't really matter if your child changes an elementary school in this model, or say if they start on the bus around Quidnesset and go to Hamilton, that doesn't mean they're going to go to middle school at Wickford, like a student from the southern part of town would. They would probably still go to middle school at Davisville. So there's no effect on middle school boundaries. 5th grade students, if you have a 5th grader affected by this change, I am proposing, and this is up for school committee approval obviously, that they will be allowed to stay in the current elementary school with a couple of caveats. One, that the parents agree to transport to the school or to an existing bus stop. So if you happen to be in this neighborhood here, there are bus stops over here in the Glen that are not all that far from you that you could drive your child to and have them go to Stony Lane. And if they're a 5th grader, they would be allowed to stay at Stony Lane. I cannot guarantee that or promise you that for a sibling of that child, however. But then there's also the rules about regular transfer requests, and I just want to be clear about what those are. Not a lot of people take advantage of that, but you'd be surprised. I say overall, I think there are about 40 to 50 transfers that we have been able to approve in the district. And what I mean by a transfer is someone whose catchment area where they live belongs to one elementary school, but they ask the district to have their child attend at another elementary school. And those, you'd be surprised, there are requests all over town for that. There are all kinds of reasons why a parent would want their child to attend a different school. They're not all going to, say, one school or away from one school. There's really kind of a nice distribution of those kinds of requests. And so what we would need is that the request, there's an actual form on our website that you can find, and you can talk to Karen Nutini, my secretary. She's great at walking people through this. It would need to be to my office by early August, because at the first school committee meeting in August is when we make decisions about, the final decisions about how many kids do we have now that the summer is done, and how many teachers are we going to need. And once we know that, then we know where we have space in different elementary classrooms that, all of a sudden if I have, say, a Hamilton class and it's a third grade and it's got, 16 kids in it, that means there's a lot of room that if there's a third grader requesting a transfer, I can honor it. But if that number is right up at the cap that we have, now there's a different cap, this is the cap, the contractual cap that we have with our teachers about, we can't have more than this many number of students in a room, then I would not be able to honor that transfer. And that's why that needs to be a year-by-year request. Sometimes those populations change a little bit, and we're just not able to do it without having to hire another teacher at an enormous expense. So that's why transfers are a little more iffy. We're usually, when we honor a transfer in elementary school, it usually stays that way right through elementary school, but there are times when it doesn't, and I don't want to make any false claims or promises about that. And then once the transfer is done, it's final for the year, and the parents agree with a transfer that they would provide transportation all the way to the school. It's not just to the best available bus stop, although if we need to, we can work for you if there's an emergency. But generally speaking, that transportation is to the school. So on that paperwork that, again, is in the back of the room, there are the actual names of streets. It's really hard to read that on this map, and I know people have looked at that on their email too, and it's just not the best map to really, zoom in and find names of streets and all that. But the names of the streets, a complete listing is on this page, and the places where the Hamilton Lottery bus stop is, which will be Quinnesset Elementary School, the playground at Yorktown, Devil's Foot Road in McConnell Court, and where Intrepid and Lennox Court meet. So I don't know, Mr. Blaswell, can I take some questions right now or go straight to citizens' comments?
Sorry. If any school committee members have any questions, and then we'll have a citizens' comments period where people can make comments on the presentation, and the superintendent may, just for a lot of people who may not have attended one of our meetings before, during citizens' comments, you can speak. We give each person 3 minutes, but we can't respond to you for reasons of the Open Meetings Act. But the superintendent may be able to address your question in his superintendent's report, which is also going to be an element of the boundary proposal. So any members have any questions for the superintendent at this point? Okay, then if not, I will move on. So,
Okay.
Dr. Jay, thank you very much for the presentation.
I appreciate you all coming out. It looks like there's not a lot of interest in this right now because the place is so big and not too many seats are taken, but I've just counted you up, and if we were at the regular meeting place, it would be a full house right now. We'd probably have to get kicked out because of the fire marshal, so it's kind of good that we moved it here after all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jay. So next we have citizens' comments. There was a list. If you did not sign up on the list because you came a little bit late, it doesn't mean you can't speak. I'll ask for another call for anyone who'd like to speak. We do ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I have a little timer here. If it flashes red, that means your 3 minutes are up, and we'd ask you to please wind up things. So the first person here is, and I apologize in advance if I butcher any pronunciations of names, James Pinheiro. And if you could please come to the microphone over there and just state your name and your address for us, please. And could you just tap on it, make sure the microphone's on? It might not. Yep.
Yes,
good,
sir,
thank you.
it's on. All right. Name is James Pinero, address 710 Slocum Road. I'm going to apologize. All these are in the form of questions, not comments. I did not realize that the format tonight worked, so I'll pose the questions and that way. First question, of the 5 school committee members, how many are required to ratify or enact this plan? The question that follows up with that is it a typical procedure in this sort of decision that the school committee would be presented only one plan to then modify, or is it seems like having multiple options for you gentlemen and ladies to decide upon would be a better plan? I don't know if you were part of the drawing up process and you've seen different revisions of this or not, but it seems that to have one plan to yes or no, I'm a little surprised. You did point out Hamilton has plenty of physical space to house students. That does not seem to be a concern. However, with the increase of possible 90 students, what measures are being made to give Hamilton the resources it's going to need to handle 90 more students in terms of counselors, teachers, ancillary phys ed, those types of resources? Is there any plan for those to be beefed up as well? Are they ready? Will they be ready by September? I guess question number 6 is not possible. I understand the legalities of needing to reduce the count efficient cove, so a delay in plan, a delay of any plan is not an option. I understand that. I'll forego that. But is it possible to grandfather any of the existing kids in their existing school? So I'm not sure the format. I'm at a yellow light. I will stop my comments.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the responses will come, but if they'll come from the superintendent or come from the committee themselves. But if you could answer that one question, that'd be.
Sorry, sorry, what was the last thing you said?
I'm not sure. I threw a number of questions at you. I'm not sure what.
Sure. So
if
what
they
we'll
would come from the superintendent.
what we'll do is Dr. Ajay has a superintendent's report immediately following citizens' comments. He'll try to address as many of those
Okay.
as we can at that point. The one that is a super easy one, your first one is it takes 3 out of 5 school committee members to do anything. So that I can answer quickly.
Excellent.
I will talk to your points as soon as the citizens' comments are done, and I'll try to take everyone's together.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next person is Julia Wood. And again, if you could please, we ask if you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record, please.
So my name is Julia Wood, and I live at 836 Slocum Road. And so my question is I know that making this decision isn't easy, and a lot of research probably went into this. On your report, just looking at how you want to further diversify the student population, and based on your socioeconomic status, the only data we have here is the free lunch percentage. And the only school that doesn't really seem to be affected by this is Stony Lane. So I was wondering why that is, and are you going to consider maybe further diversifying that further to kind of spread that out between the different districts?
Okay.
Thank you. Next is Victoria Vasira. And again, if you just speak your name and address, please.
Sure, Victoria Vieira, 51 Thomas Anthony Road. I'm in the yellow. I have 3 little ones, 7, 5, and 3. 2 of them go to Stony Lane right now. And I'm also a teacher, and I know how difficult it is to transfer schools. So I'm just wondering what the supports and the transition services that you have in place for these kids, any of all of them moving.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is, and I said it wrong last time, I'm going to say it wrong again, but Pam Pinero, was it?
Pam Pinero, 710 Slocum Road. I oppose this proposal for my kids who are 9 and 7 and go to Stony Lane. I had the pleasure of being redistricted in this very town between Stony Lane and Hamilton School in 3rd grade 32 years ago. You have talked a lot about numbers. These are people. These are little children who do not understand these numbers. My daughter's response was, why are you taking kids? Why are you taking me out of my school and replacing me with other children? That is a very hard concept to explain to a 9 and 7-year-old. I do not understand why there are not more proposals on the table that are up for community debate. I urge the committee to push for more proposals, to look at other areas that could be redistricted, and if redistricting is absolutely necessary, I ask you to be able to look at in my eye and be able to tell me that I can tell my kids that this is the only option. You are forcing our hand. You are limiting the number of kids you are moving, which you might think is beneficial, but my kids will be moving with very few peers, and that will have a major impact on their emotional and educational growth. I do not understand, if you are trying to grow Hamilton, why you are not moving more kids to Hamilton, which would be almost more acceptable than this current plan that isolates so few children. Please consider those little children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Allison Bernard.
Allison Bernard, 5C Cadillac Road. I'm just a mom at Stony Lane, and I just wanted to say that many of the families that will be getting switched out of Stony Lane, the families and the parents are huge volunteers at Stony Lane. One of the reasons Stony Lane is amazing is the parent involvement. And if you go on that list and the accolades I could say about many of the families that will be placed out of Stony Lane is that some of those parents are what makes Stony Lane amazing. So it would be a huge loss for all of the kids there. They're already deeply rooted into their volunteer work. All the children know many of these parents, and I think that should be looked at a little. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the sign-up list, but if there's anyone who would like to speak and did not have an opportunity to sign up, we'll certainly allow you to speak. So if you could just, again, speak your name.
David
and your
Nicolato,
address.
just moved here, 10 Sylvan Court. Sorry, too many addresses in the head. As the superintendent said, this is my first redistricting. My children are not affected by this particular rezoning map right now. But as the superintendent said, if this is going to need to occur in 2-3 years, change it. Break up these boundaries, because in the numbers that you're showing here, you're removing 8 students from Stony. Stony, as you've said, does not change much over the past 8, 10, 12 years. I would rather be more comfortable having an 85 to 88% capacity throughout all of our elementary schools, so no child and no family should have to do this again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Short people. Hi, I'm Carrie Valsatoro. I live at 4 Southwick Circle. I guess it's a two-part question, really. Looking at the 5th grade students, I was curious how many 5th grade students will be involved in this potential transition. And I see on the informational sheet that it says that the parents will then have to agree to transport their child if we want to leave them in the 5th grade where they've been in school with their friends for the last 4 years. So, like the other lady eloquently said, I am against this proposal because, for my sense as well, for me to explain to my child why he cannot potentially stay in the school he's been in with the friends he's known, the only school he's ever been in, because we moved here from out of state and do not have the luxury of having family or people that can help us with transportation, that my option as a parent is to say, I'm sorry, honey, you can't stay with all of your friends because mommy and daddy have to work. And I don't have the ability to afford someone to pick you up or to take you. And as it is now, we pay to go to the before-school care. Now, I can't afford the after-school care. So that's going to be my answer is, I'm sorry, son, you can't be with your friends any longer and celebrate your best year in elementary school in 5th grade. So I really do hope that there'll be some additional plan for those 5th graders, that some form of transportation can be put in place, because it's already absurd that there's no late bus here at the high school for kids who need to stay for extra help but have no parent who can provide them transportation home. This is another example. There are families where 2 parents work. We have to work, not because we want to work per se, but we have to work. But now our children are left out in this amazing school district that we chose to live in, moving here from another state we picked here. But yet, we seem, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that are punished that we both have to work. And our kids have to be put aside and put out because of that. So please do remember that these are not numbers. These are children who are affected. Little children who do not understand why. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Kate Scott, 10 Jasmine Circle. My children go to Hamilton, and so I know that there's going to be the increase in the neighborhood with the possibility of up to 55 in the lottery. My question regarding that is, will we be able to limit the size of the classrooms? Because we look at some of our grades now that are full, kindergarten, 1st grade, and 4th grade are at capacity with 2 classes in that grade for each of them. And some of those classes struggle because of how high those numbers are. So knowing that there'll be 40 kids, 39 kids as it stands right now, plus upwards of 55, are we able to guarantee that, each classroom is not at capacity and teachers have a hard time teaching because of how many kids are in there? I would prefer to have 3 classes in each grade where they're at 90% instead of 2 classes at each grade where they're at 100 to 105%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Terry. I live at 94 Woodland Drive. I have a daughter going into the 4th grade in the fall, and I'll have a son now entering kindergarten at Forest Park. We are affected by the change. My question to the committee would be, what is being done to validate residency for Forest Park students? Because I am aware there's multiple students there that do not live in that area, nor may not live in North Kingstown in general. So my question is, if my daughter's going to be bumped out of that school, or my son, but there's children in that school that don't even live in town or in that district, what's being done to validate that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so going to have Dr. Ogier give his superintendent's report, which will hopefully be able to respond to some of the questions. And then I'll also allow any school committee members who have any questions on his report or anything else to add who would like to as well.
So all very good questions. I appreciate the comments, and I will try to do my best to take, no, sorry about that. I'll try to do my best to address every one of them, and I encourage you that if you have further questions, you can talk after this meeting or take a phone call anytime. I have no problem with that at all. So can this plan be modified? Yes, it can. We decided to have the plan put on the agenda for 3 meetings, so that gives people ample opportunity to weigh in. If the school committee directs me to come back with another plan or to make adjustments to this plan, I'm happy to do so. The reason why there is one plan out there and not multiple plans is just because I don't want to confuse the community and to throw people into absolute chaos. As you know, and I can understand, your child's elementary school is a very important thing to you. This is something, by the way, that happened to me in that last, or to my kids, in the last redistricting about 10 years ago, and the years previous to that. I was just coming into the district, but I lived in the district for 20 years. So my kids went to Fishing Cove, they went to Wickford Elementary, they went back to Fishing Cove, and they went to Hamilton, all in that span of time. Now, you know, they were very resilient about it. Their neighborhood went with them, and that's where most of their friends were. So that's part of it. That doesn't mean it speaks to every child's experience. I can certainly understand it's not ideal. And we have not moved on anything like this for 10 years because we haven't had to. So resources at Hamilton, a few people asked about that. Again, I want to reiterate, the cap that we have on this page is not the same as the classroom cap for a particular, for instance, in the elementary school, 19 students can be as a cap for kindergarten. Now, I am dedicated in doing this work without adding staff for this. So same number of teachers, same number of students district-wide, but so when we look at this bus, for instance, that would come, this would be on a case-by-case basis, grade by grade, resource by resource. So if we find that every class is going to be capped out at Hamilton, we probably wouldn't allow, you know, it could be that there are, say, 5 kids allowed on the bus for grade 2, but we're able to have 9 kids on the bus for grade 3. And that's how, once they're in, they're in. But that initial time, it would be handled like that. It's not just whatever grade you happen to be, come along and we're going to figure it out. So the same rules that currently apply would apply with this. You know, there are certain rules that we absolutely can't go above a certain number in any given class. And there are a lot of people who, you know, regularly have an issue year after year that they feel their child's class is too high. That's a contractually agreed to item. I think just about everybody out there would like to have those numbers lower, but that becomes a tremendous expense to the district when you're doing that. So I think we're pretty consistent with most districts in Rhode Island with the numbers that we have for classroom caps and all that sort of thing. And, you know, we're going to allocate resources where they're needed. So yes, we can be ready in September for 90 more students at Hamilton. We would figure all of this out by May, and we would make the staffing moves that we would need to make. Obviously, there'd be some schools that there'd be 1 or 2 less teachers, and Hamilton would probably have a few more teachers once all of this is done. If it in fact turns out that 90 students end up moving from other schools to Hamilton. But same resources, and we feel there'd be, you know, approximately the same comfort level that we currently experience in all of the schools in terms of, you know, how many in a class, that sort of thing. The potential to grandfather all of the existing students, I don't see how that could happen. The busing resources that we have, you know, having to do a route that would include a neighborhood for more than one school could be really difficult on us. But it is something that I will take back and, you know, look at and come back with more answers to these questions at our next meeting. The question about Stony Lane not necessarily being affected, particularly by the, you know, the free and reduced lunch item. That's a good question. One of my hopes in this, you know, just making these moves with just, you know, the income population in mind is not the way to do this, but the reason for making the moves is the capacity issue. And if we can make some changes based on, you know, the distribution of low-income students, and that is the way in schools we can measure that by students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, are happy to do so. This move makes a difference in that Hamilton is higher and Quidnesset is lower, but the other schools really don't move all that much. And someone said, can we do something where we get, you know, 85% around the district and have a more equal distribution around the district? Yes, we can. I could put that proposal in front of the school committee in 2 weeks. However, this place would be absolutely full with parents with the similar concerns that you have tonight about, my kid really likes their elementary school and they like to stay there. So one of the points, you know, and this is just me, that I'm trying to honor in coming at this is trying to provide as few of those kinds of disruptions as I can while making this work so that I feel comfortable that we can buy at least 3 or 4 more years before we have to make any changes. And if we see that, you know, there's one neighborhood where a lot of people move in, there may just be an even smaller adjustment next time between just 2 schools in the district instead of, you know, all 5 having to make some changes. So trying to do this in at least disruptive a way as I possibly can. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. The wrong way to do it is just that's what I had in mind in bringing this forward. Trying to make sure that I've covered the proposal for the 5th graders, trying to do the best that we can, again, without, you know, sending more than 1 bus into each neighborhood, and just in order to get the results that we need. I realize a couple of people said, you know, these are students, they're not numbers, they're kids and people, they're not numbers. I get that. But we do have an issue that is number related, and that is capacity of buildings. And no matter what, I need to do something about Forest Park. That's for certain, because I would have to tell a number of people from Forest Park that they're rezoned one way or another next year before we go to 102% capacity. That I cannot do without. And I'm afraid that if I don't do something at least a little bit with Stony Lane, I may have that same issue there as well coming up very soon. So I'm trying to do anything I can to make that change. I think I've addressed everything here tonight. I don't know if the committee has any particular questions or concerns.
School committee members with a question or comment? Mr. Jones, just going to go on.
Question or comment with the 5th graders. If they are in a before school program, they get bused from the before school program, would that still be able to happen to their home school or their the school they're currently?
Yeah, I believe so. That's a new one for me, so I'd have to kind of double check on that, but I don't see why that couldn't work.
A before school program at Aim High. Aim High sends a bus to
Yeah,
Stony,
I don't see why that wouldn't be able to work. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for folks coming out, short of maybe cutting librarians or cutting a sports team. It's good to see people come out, because the issue is, I think as Dr. Jay noted, it's larger than just this. I mean, I understand your point. I was in Virginia. The kids were young. They got redistricted. We moved here. The very first thing is my kids got caught in the Stony-Hamilton shuffle too. If you could go back and have a crystal ball, I don't think we would have the elementary schools precisely where they are right now. And it's easy kind of in hindsight to look at that and go, the town didn't develop the way the schools were placed and certain schools were closed. And I understand the point about not wanting to do this over and over. So this committee has spent the better part of 2 years thinking about a total capital, long-term capital school consolidation plan. To me, that actually is what would solve this larger issue without having to redistrict now. Well, wouldn't solve it now because we'd have to build it if that's what the voters want. But it would solve these periodic points where we have schools that are at capacity and schools that are super low at capacity. That, if it gets through, you know, the final plan or the option and the town council and the voters decide to adopt that, is going to have a major impact on the town. The total school borders are going to be redrawn because we're going to close a couple schools. We're going to have a single middle school. That's going to be a major disruption, although I think for the long-term interest of the town, our education, our taxpayers, is is what would serve the community best, as being good stewards of the town's resources. But if that doesn't happen, you all know, the bond that the voters, graciously approved last November only fixed some big, a few big items across all our schools. We don't have the capacity to keep going every 5 to 8 years and keep asking for $10, $15, $20 million to do that. So if we don't do that, if we don't do some kind of school consolidation, what we're going to end up doing is having sort of schools in this situation and eventually doing some kind of massive redistricting. So I guess I would say, it's emotional, it's difficult. I can tell you our preference would be not to do it. We don't have the luxury of the Open Meeting Act of sort of getting together here and there over coffee and coming up with these things. We sort of, have to rely on the superintendent to give him the problem, and he comes up with some of these solutions. And I agree with him. He's thought a lot about, and his staff, some different options and come up with what he thinks now is the best to solve the immediate problem. As he said, we can't have Forest Park at that. I mean, I appreciate, but you also have to put yourself in the position of the kids and the parents of Forest Park. We can't have a school that's 102, 103%. And nobody wants a year or 2 years from now to do the same thing to Stony Lane. So I think, again, this is why we do this. We have multiple meetings, but put it in the context of there's one problem to solve. Maybe we just focus on solving that small one, because as the superintendent mentioned, there's nothing in our budget now to add additional resources. So, if it works out that this is going to require major resources without that funding, we may not be able to do this plan in its current form. But I would suggest that everyone, expect of this committee, expect of the town council, to come up with a long-term plan so we're not doing this every few years. To me, I think this committee has a goal to sort of, we visited one, we're probably going to present a couple more options to the town council and see where it goes. But I would just say, put yourself that there's a bigger problem to solve for long-term. And this is just trying to really put a Band-Aid on it until we address that. And if we don't address it, there'll be, every few years, this kind of issue to solve.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'm just going to add, I understand very much this is an emotional issue. I remember I was redistricted in an elementary school. I've been through it myself. It's not something we take lightly, and we don't want to be doing any changes. North Kingstown's had the benefit of being really stable with elementary boundaries for a lot longer than a lot of towns and cities are. The only thing that is really putting this before us today is the fact that we are going to be over capacity in an elementary school. We have to do something. Anything that we do affects someone, and we're very cognizant of that. But we have to do something. We are not going to be making, as I mentioned, any decisions this evening. We wanted to give everyone an opportunity to be here tonight at our following meeting as well. We will have citizens' comments and look to hear from anyone else. I expect, I see a number of our reporters here. I expect this will probably be in the newspaper, which I wanted to make sure as well, because not everyone reads their emails, and gives the opportunity for more people to come out and make comments. So it's not something we're going to do very quickly. We'll take all your comments to heart, and then we expect, not at our next meeting, but at the following meeting, we'd make a final decision on what we're going to do here. So, and I want to thank you all very much for coming out. As Mr. Jones kind of alluded, one more second. As Mr. Jones alluded to, there aren't too many things that we do that pack these rooms. So a lot of times we have 2 people in the room. So we want to thank you very much for coming out this evening. And I encourage you to come to some of our meetings when it may not be something that's as affecting you in a way that you're unhappy about as well. Mr. Jones?
I just wanted to follow up. Someone mentioned about residency.
Oh, that's a big one.
And I'll,
I do want to answer that.
So,
Thank you.
that's theft, really. It's theft. So I think just like if you knew someone was stealing from the town, you know, you have an obligation to bring that up. I will say in February, and Superintendent, correct me if I'm wrong, even if we could prove it now, I'm pretty sure the state would say, so what? Because it's February. And, you know, Mrs. King, Superintendent, our legal counsel can talk about, well, we may think that it's wrong. The state, not saying they don't think it's wrong, but they look at, you know, a lot of other issues and just don't see it quite as black and white maybe as I see it, you know. But when you're stealing a seat that doesn't belong to you, you're taking away from those who pay the taxes, who, you know, who educate the kids, who do all that. So if you see something or you think there's something, please report it. There's a whistleblower thing, you know, there's ways of reporting it confidentially. But you're absolutely right. You know, if part of this problem is because we have people who don't belong here taking those seats, that causes a problem.
And just quickly, to what you said, we do investigate all of those cases. We can hear about them from any number of various reasons. The district will go as far as necessary to investigate a residency claim. If someone is not living in the town of North Kingstown and sending their child to the school, we do investigate that, and we do everything that we can to make sure that the child is placed in the appropriate school district that they should be at. Because as Mr. Jones just said, it is not fair for the taxpayers of the town of North Kingstown to be paying to educate a child that's another town's responsibility. So you know, we will absolutely investigate that.
Yeah. And I just want you to know that we do that on a regular basis. I don't know the specific number per year, but I would say we're probably looking at about a dozen cases a year where we are very aggressive. We hire an investigator, we do everything we can to verify a residency, and if there is, if it's not right, we do prosecute. And now sometimes, as Mr. Jones says, if a student, if it's being contended at the Department of Education and they may make a decision that they're going to hold the child harmless till the end of the year or to the end of the semester, so there may be a period of waiting before the student makes the move. But we are very aggressive about prosecuting that if we see it happen. And we're not alone in that. A number of districts deal with this issue, and we're one of them. But if we hear about a potential issue, we do investigate it. So if you're aware of anything, that even if you think it might be that, please let me know. And we will, I promise you, we will investigate it. So.
In a way, it's a form of flattery that people will try to sneak into our schools. So it's a side effect of what we have here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming. We're going to move on with our agenda if no one else has any comments on that topic. Okay. Next item on the agenda would be, recognitions. I'm going to back up a tiny bit.
Yes, we do have a recognition tonight, and this is senior Alyssa Levitt. Her senior project has reached a national platform. Alyssa's project is about recognizing the signs of emotional suffering, and this pertains to interventions for preventing suicide and other mental health conditions. Alyssa created an Instagram, and the students have been participating in it with mental health activities that she has posted, and they take part in it, and she posts the pictures, etc. So recently she joined the Barrington Prevention Coalition and gave a presentation. She also did it at the NK Prevention Coalition with the help of Kayla Mudge, who was also an NKHS alumni. And the director from Change the Direction, which is a big initiative, was so impressed with her project that she asked Alyssa to share her work in a toolkit, and that will be featured on their international website. So we're very proud of the work that Alyssa is doing, and Kayla as well.
And we will invite Alyssa to come and show her her work to the school committee in a presentation next month.
Great. Thank you very much. Next are our routine items. If I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of February 5th, 2019.
So moved.
Have a motion from Ms. Hoskins.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And I can disclose that no votes were taken in our executive session this evening. Next, we have our consent agenda. Do any members have any items on the consent agenda that they would like to exempt? Was everyone at the meeting? C1 and 2. Yep. So Mr. Jones has exempted C1 and 2. Any others? I would ask for a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items. A motion from Mr. Tony Jones, a second from Mr. Robert Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. The two exempted items I think we can take together, so I will make a motion to approve items C1 and C2.
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstention from Mr. Tony Jones. Sorry, Mr. Robert Jones. Too many Mr. Joneses. Unfinished business, 2018-19 school budget? No. Okay. 2019-20 school budget, I will note again that we need to approve the budget to present to the town council at our next meeting. So again, if you have any data requests, anything that you would like to add or remove from the budget prior to that meeting, if you could please get a question to Mrs. King so that she can crunch the numbers, because we need to approve a bottom line dollar figure on that date. Anything else on that, Mr. Jones?
For those of you who stayed, and I'm not going to ask this of the superintendent because we don't know the answer. But if you're here, I would recommend that you reach out to your General Assembly representatives. One of the components of our budget is state aid. And I won't bore you, and we won't go into discussion about state aid, except to say the state aid has one number that's posted. We know it's not right. It's going to change. We've been told different things how it's going to change. And there's some things in there that don't make sense, even to people who do this, every year for a living. But it's February. I would just say put yourself in a position where you're employed and part of your pay, your employer goes, we think it's going to be this, but you know what, it might be this, and we're probably not going to tell you until halfway into your working year when you have to, already make your budget. And guess what? Maybe by the time it gets all approved and you have to execute it, it may be changed again. So layer on top of what the superintendent presented here today, because that needs to be fairly resource neutral, and make the point we don't even know yet. And yet we have to make a decision in what? 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that. It's incredibly difficult. And from a taxpayer's perspective, the numbers we're talking about are hundreds of thousands. So that's a difference in 1%, 1.5% on your tax levy, which is not insignificant either in this town. So there's been resolutions passed. This committee has asked, and the town council, I think, supported us to provide some stability in the state aid funding. A plea, I would say, is call our general assemblies and say, enough is enough. Please give us some stability to figure out how to get a state aid education done right. Because we're probably going to approve a budget that won't be right, despite our best efforts. And part of that is because the state can't get its act together. When it says one thing that it's investing in education, it's not really true. If it wanted to invest in education, it would provide more stability and certainty to the districts where education actually occurs.
Yeah, and Mr. Jones's analogy is a good one. What's happening to us is essentially, imagine if your employer told you, just so you know, next year we expect to have a significant cut to your salary and for the next 2 years after that, and you budget accordingly, and then all of a sudden they tell you, oh, guess what, we're giving you more money, and you say, why? And no one can tell you. Now, we're happy that it looks like we're going to have more funds than we expected to have this year, so we're certainly not going to complain about that. But for stability and planning and budgets, it's just not, there's no way to do it, because it is just as likely that they could have told us, oh, by the way, it's going to be worse than we thought. We need to have some stability, or it's just impossible to plan. Okay. Anything else on the 2019-20 budget? Next is CIP existing bond or future bond. Nothing to report there. So we have reached the end of our agenda. There are some special reports in your packet if you had any questions on those. Otherwise, we've reached the end of the agenda. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for coming this evening.